Welcome. Obviously, the title of today's session is going to be VUCA to Voilà, bringing clarity to organizational chaos. And so I wanted to start with a personal story. I hope you don't mind, because VUCA is like the storm inside of businesses that's the equivalent of what we would call a hurricane, right? So I moved to Southwest Florida, Fort Myers, right out of college, and I lived there until 2023. And during that period, we experienced hurricane force impacts from 11 hurricanes, 10 tropical storms. So storms kind of were a normal part of life for me as a Southwest Florida person. Um, it was kind of standard from July to November. You watched the weather, you watched the cone, you prepared. And for those that were overcome with fear, they evacuated. We always stayed, but we always went to safer, shelters or buildings. But then there was Hurricane Ian. And in 2022, Ian came onshore in Southwest Florida as a high-end Category 4 hurricane with 150-mile-an-hour winds. The storm surge devastated Fort Myers Beach and all the areas around it. It was documented as the most costly hurricane in history, causing $112 billion in damage. You guys, if you haven't heard this story, you won't believe it. We had a home on the river. We sold it the day before Hurricane Ian. Literally, we were at the title company at 10 o'clock in the morning. The rains were already happening. And we were the closing that after we left, they closed the doors and went home. So we sold our house on the river. And the very next day, that house that we had sold got 4 feet of water in it from Hurricane Ian. That was the call that was close enough that let us know it's time to move on. We've kind of had enough, right? So we had always spent every vacation, every moment of free time in North Carolina. And so kind of that was the natural escape from us from Florida storms. So we moved in 2023 to the mountains of West North Carolina. And I thought, well, at least I don't have to worry about hurricanes anymore. But I spoke too soon. In 2024, Hurricane Helene swept through West North Carolina and caused catastrophic flooding around Asheville, including levels that surpassed records dating back as far as 1916. Like we're talking 24 feet of water in Asheville, which is just 30 minutes from me. Helene was the costliest hurricane in North Carolina history, with damages in 59 million. So again, we were very fortunate, didn't have any damage, but I came to realize that apparently you can move away from the coast or you can move locations, but you can't necessarily move away from the storms of life. And so I want to transition that into what we're talking about today, because there's something else I've learned from hurricanes. And that's when you're preparing for one, you don't spend all your energy trying to control the hurricane or figure out what to do with the hurricane, dance around it or whatever. You can't do that. You certainly don't spend your time chasing the storm unless you're one of those crazy pilots in a hurricane plane that they fly into the middle of it. I don't get that, but there are those jobs, right? Instead, you pay attention. Instead, you pay attention to what's happening outside, but your decisions are made based on what is happening where you are. Like, what does my family need? What needs to be protected? What are we vulnerable to? What resources do we have? What resources do we need? The stores and the gas stations were always running out of water and gas during that time because everybody needed gas for their generators and they needed water to sustain them for the days or weeks after the hurricanes. And so what needs to happen right now and what can wait? That was kind of the protocol for dealing with a hurricane. And you get very clear very quickly when a hurricane is bearing down on what matters. And so, let me change the slide here. And that's where hurricanes and leadership have a lot in common, because businesses today are operating inside of their own kind of hurricane, a marketplace that's defined by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And this has become so commonplace in business. We've named the storm, and it's named VUCA. VUCA is the equivalent of a business hurricane. So these are the four conditions of VUCA: volatility, conditions changing too fast; uncertainty, the future is hard to predict; complexity, too many variables interconnected; and then ambiguity, just unclear about what things mean or what to do next. So did any of you see any of these elements happening in today's business world? And just speak up, because I don't see all your little pictures here, so I won't call on you, but what do you see going on out there that you can now point to and go, yeah, that's VUCA?
The entire matrix.
We're talking about AI here, right?
Yeah,
AI
Yes.
implementation.
Ambiguity
That's
is a
one
big
thing.
one.
Absolutely. It's what else is attributing to the VUCA?
My topic of the day is customer service, and all of this is service driven.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and
Global
putting
markets are crazy right now.
Global
Yeah.
markets are nuts. Yeah.
Yeah, like international trade because of,
Yeah.
Geopolitical situations.
Geopolitical.
Volatile.
Yes.
the U.S.
Just a little
government.
bit. Right. Yeah. Government.
What's
So
really
these,
interesting in this is that it spans the entire time continuum. You've got conditions changing fast in the present tense. You've got the future being hard to predict, the future, obviously.
yeah.
Variables is everything we know up to now is probably not true anymore. And the ambiguity of the future. And so
Yeah.
I really love the way it all works within that time continuum of you don't know, but you have to do the best you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these four conditions, they're not theoretical anymore, right? They are the environment leaders are finding themselves operating in every day. Volatility, conditions changing quickly, technology shifts, customer expectations are moving, markets are turning. All the things that you named, may have made sense somehow 6 months ago, but they may suddenly need to be reconsidered, right? And so that may be one of the hardest things that leaders are facing today is because we have plenty of information, but oftentimes we don't even know what it means in context to this storm that we're living in. Is declining performance a people problem? Is it a leadership problem? Is it a work design problem? Is it a structural problem? Is new technology the answer, or is that simply adding more complexity? Leaders are really caught in this storm, and the external environments are creating tremendous amounts of pressure. But eventually, that pressure enters the organization, and I think we see this already happening, and it shows up as competing priorities, unclear decisions, reactive initiatives, and people really not knowing what matters. And when leaders are standing in that kind of storm, there is one response that almost feels irresistible, and that is move faster, right? The problem is you cannot outrun a hurricane, just as my own life showed. You can't outrun the storm. And so when leaders feel the pressure of VUCA, one of the most natural responses is to accelerate. They want you to move faster, adopt faster, decide faster, just transform faster, implement faster. And sometimes speed does matter, but speed is only useful when you have enough clarity about where you're going. If visibility is poor, accelerating can actually increase the damage. That is true in a hurricane. It's also true inside an organization. When leaders are reacting to external pressures, they can quickly confuse motion with progress. They launch initiatives, they adopt technologies, they set targets, they reorganize teams and measure activity. And everyone can become extraordinarily busy while the organization is really no closer to solving things that matter. And that's the danger of VUCA. It doesn't just create uncertainty outside the organization, it creates reactivity inside the organization. And so once leaders become reactive, the easiest thing to measure often becomes the thing they start managing. And so I want to ask for a show of hands. Have you ever been a part of an initiative where everyone was incredibly busy, but 6 months later, you weren't sure if anything meaningful had actually changed? Anyone or everyone? I can't see your hands.
All the
Yeah,
time.
definitely.
Everyone,
Yeah.
Karen,
Everyone.
Literally,
Everyone.
yeah.
Yeah.
Publish or perish.
Yeah, that is what speed without clarity looks like. And we can see that happening right now in some of the biggest companies in the world. Let me give you a few examples, and I love this. All right, so we have 3 examples of collateral damage already from Storm VUCA. And I just want to touch on them real quick. Uber's collateral damage, Canva's collateral damage, as well as Amazon's. Does anyone have a synopsis of, let's start with Uber, know what happened there?
They overspent.
Yeah.
Right, token limits and stuff. They went way
Yeah.
over. They were token maxing to
Yeah.
learn AI the fastest and went over
Yeah.
by a lot.
Yeah, they spent their entire AI budget for the year in 4 months. They established a leaderboard for usage of AI. And boy, that backfired. The lesson there from that collateral damage for the rest of us is activity does not equal value, because nothing came out of that other than a big ass, AI bill. So let's move to Canva. Anyone know what happened there?
I'm going to take a wild guess. They got too complex too fast and people couldn't keep up.
No, possibly, but they actually took a more human-centered approach. And if you read the story, you'd be going, wow, this is pretty human-centric. They actually shut down operations for all 5,000 employees for a week, and they gave them uninterrupted time. They told them, clear your calendar, don't look at your emails, don't do any tasks, devote the week to AI. And guess what happened at the end of the week? I believe it was the COO was quoted as saying they could not tie any valuable outcomes to that. So the lesson there is access and even space does not equal transformation.
Leadership is needed.
Yeah, leadership and direction. You know, talk about ambiguity. Oh, you give me a week to play with AI. Okay, what do I do? That, absolutely leadership with peace. And the final one is Amazon. Has anyone heard about Amazon's faux pas? Well, I'll just tell you, Amazon.
Which one?
Yeah. You know what I've started to do, and I would love it if you guys do this too. Anytime I see one of these, it seems foolish in hindsight kind of stories, I just put down at the bottom, I wonder what their human score is. I bet it's pretty low. That's my only comment. So get them curious about us. But anyway, so what Amazon did in this particular case that I want to tie to VUCA is they had an AI agent that they created. I didn't document in my notes here what the AI agent was supposed to do, but basically the agent ran unchecked for 5 months, burning through, get this, I mean, my bank account would have loved this, $1.8 million it burned through, when the expected cost of that agent was $190,000. So, and when we have these 3 examples, what do you think they have in common? And, go ahead and type something in the chat if you have a minute. What do you think they have in common? What happened there is they responded to the storm before they got clear on what their organization actually needed. So that's the collateral damage of VUCA. It's not necessarily bad leadership, though we could judge if we wanted to. It's what happens when the pressure outside becomes louder than the reality that's going on inside. And so that's what storm VUCA collateral looks like. So if chasing the storm isn't the answer, then what is? Let's go back to my story about actual hurricanes for a moment, because when a hurricane is approaching, the smartest thing you can do is surprisingly simple. you stop focusing on controlling the storm, and you get very clear about what needs your attention where you are, right? And so that's what we want to do with VUCA. We don't want to control the storm. We want to prepare our organization. When a hurricane is approaching, you don't try to solve it. You monitor it. You give it respect. But your preparation happens at home, and that's what needs to happen in business. You look at what is vulnerable, what needs reinforcing, what needs protecting, what resources you have, and what needs attention first. That's kind of the preparation for hurricanes. But in business, they need the same type of prep. The marketplace may be volatile. AI may be accelerating. Regulations are changing, all the things, competitors. But the question comes down to what is happening inside your organization that's going to determine how well you withstand the storm. With a house, the vulnerabilities are very visible, right? You can see the loose shingles, you know which windows you want to cover. You can identify what needs to be reinforced before the storm arrives. But inside organizations, the vulnerabilities are often much harder to see. That friction may show up as missed deadlines, stalled decisions, disengagement, resistance or poor execution. But the underlying cause may remain invisible. And so that's where human score comes in. We look across 5 dimensions: work design, organizational structure, culture, decision-making, and fairness, to make the invisible conditions impacting execution more visible. But because once leaders can see what needs attention, they can finally decide what to protect, what to strengthen, what to change. And that's the difference between reacting to the storm and preparing for it intelligently. Once the invisible becomes visible, leaders can stop guessing about where to act. And that is, you guessed it, the voila moment.
Voila.
The voila moment. And so just a quick look at what human score shows their organization across those 5 dimensions. This is our dashboard, which kind of breaks down the data for leaders. This is where human score takes the companies from VUCA to Voilà. We make invisible organization conditions visible. Instead of a leader knowing that something is wrong or simply seeing symptoms, they can begin to see where the conditions surrounding the work are actually either supporting execution or where they are getting in the way. For example, the organization that is experiencing poor execution, on the surface, that might get labeled as a people problem. But when you look underneath the hood, you may discover the real issue is decision-making, or perhaps organizational structure, or even the way the work is designed itself. And because this data can be viewed across different parts of the organization through the demographics there on the bottom left, leaders can begin to see where the experience changes by level, by location, tenure, other demographic information that's really important. And that gives leaders a very different starting point for action. No longer are they asking, what should we do all about this? They can start asking, what specifically or where specifically do we need to co-create better solutions with our people and for our people? And that's what clarity looks like. The storm is still going to be raging outside, but now I know what needs my attention inside. And once you know what actually needs your attention, something interesting happens. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I have a question, Karen. It's Daria.
Yeah.
So with the demographic distribution with country, what happens when you have a globalized workforce?
Yeah, that's a great question. What that does for you is say, for instance, we're just going to use this dummy data, and this is a screenshot, so I can't click on it for you, but this is the overall organization's information, their work design 76.95. For instance, one of our clients had half of the workforce in the US and half of the workforce in the Philippines, pretty much half. So for him, he could click on US, And these scores would change to just reflect what the U.S. employees had rated things.
Okay,
Or
got
he
it.
could click on the Philippines and see what the scores reflected in the Philippines. And the insights that could give him is, maybe work design isn't broken. Maybe it's just not translating between the two countries. And the real focus of our change in work design in this example should happen in the Philippines and not the US, or vice versa. Does that answer your question, Daria?
Yeah, or bringing them together, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, totally.
Yeah. So it really helps them identify the gaps, not only just in the culture of different global, different countries, but also in the way work, originate or happens in those countries. And they can do that same thing with all of these demographic distributions here: age, gender, race, disability, and site. So say, for instance, they're talking about that infamous, let's bring them all back to the office decision. And they look at the demographics here. Well, this is my score for the people that are in the office, and this is my score for the people that are out of the office. They can see really quickly where the disconnect is, where the challenges are. It could be more than likely not as they expected, but the demographics can show them greater detail on all those fronts. This is the voila moment, that clear starting point. Not the moment where leaders suddenly have every answer. No, that's not a given. But the moment where they finally have a clear starting point. That's what Human Score is designed to provide. Once leaders can see the invisible conditions inside the organization, they can stop guessing, and start moving with intention. We measure to make those conditions visible. Then we diagnose so we don't confuse symptoms with root causes. And then we help them through our consultant collective co-create around what the organization actually needs, using the obstacles as the design brief. And then we remeasure, because meaningful change isn't just about taking action. It's about learning whether that action worked and what needs to happen again. Up until the point of Human Scores creation, as far as I know, leadership's talk about continuous improvement really was nothing more than lip service. There wasn't a method for proving that, hey, we are continually improving our organization. They could point to the bottom line, but that it has so many other outside influences that it's hard to tell. Just because your numbers are going up doesn't necessarily mean your organization is improving. So this is how clarity becomes progress, and it's how leaders move from reacting to the storm to responding with focus on what matters. When leaders have that kind of clarity, the storm may still be raging, but the organization is no longer in chaos. You know where to begin, you know what requires your attention, and you can act with far greater confidence. So let me leave you with this. VUCA is the storm, but the goal was never to eliminate VUCA. You can't control storms. You can't control the market, the technology, the economy, the geopolitics, or what next disruption's coming around the corner. But there is a lighthouse in the storm, and the lighthouse doesn't stop the storm. It just gives you a fixed point of reference when everything is moving around you. And that's what clarity does for leaders. They now know where to start, what matters in this moment, and where to go next. Human Score is that dashboard that helps clarity by making the invisible conditions visible, showing leaders where change and execution needs to be made. And so once they're able to do that, something powerful happens. The obstacle becomes the way. Instead of treating the obstacle as something to avoid, you use it as part of the design brief. And now the storm becomes useful. AI becomes a tool for us solving a known problem inside the organization. Market change becomes data. Constraints actually become a focus and a catalyst for innovation, and disruptions become opportunities. That's the difference between chasing VUCA and navigating through it. You don't have to control the storm. You just need enough clarity to know where you are, what the moment requires and what your next move should be. And that's the move from VUCA to Voilà.